Comment, like, subscribe. The bell keeps you notified. It helps the show thrive. I am sure that there are people out there who think that this teardrop-shaped island off the coast of India is just a part of the nation of India which it is so close to, in the same way many nations have additional islands that they call their land too. Of course, that is not the case at all. This island, which is roughly 25,000 square miles in size and home to around 22 million people, is none other than the independent nation of Sri Lanka. Of course, India and Sri Lanka do have some things in common. It would be hard for them to not, what with being so close to one another, but these two fully independent nations have their own cultures and histories. Sri Lanka is not just a part of India, and it's not even a mini India of sorts. The reason I'm defending it so much is probably because I hold this country very near and dear to my heart, because a couple years back I was lucky enough to be able to explore so much of this nation, meeting many wonderful people and seeing many breathtaking sights. So forgive me if I'm being a little bit self-indulgent. My love of Sri Lanka has led me to talking about this nation before, specifically talking about all the names the nation has had in the past. Today, instead of focusing on the nation's names, I want to focus on its languages. Something that I've always found fascinating with Sri Lanka is the variety of languages spoken on the island, despite its relatively small size. The nation has two official languages and another recognized language, which is often referred to as a link language. But beyond this, there are other languages spoken in the land too. Some of these languages evolved natively on the island, while others arrived on the island due to the many different settlers and colonizers from around the world who called this island home over the centuries. Though the most distinctly Sri Lankan language to many people is most likely Sinhala. This is the language spoken by the Sinhalese people of Sri Lanka, the most populous native ethnic group on the island. Around 70 to 75% of the nation's population are seen as being Sinhalese, with Sinhala most likely being their native language, so it is without a doubt the most popularly spoken language in the nation, being spoken by around 16 million residents. The name of Sinhala relates to Sri Lanka's love of lions, as they are even seen on the nation's flag. It's thought to ultimately come from the Sanskrit word for lion, Simha, and if you're thinking to yourself, hey, that sounds like the Swahili word for lion, Simba, I wonder if there's a connection, then you are not alone. Someone on Quora has already asked about this, and it seems to be an unknown. There might be a link, but it will be a pretty ancient one at best. Earliest recordings we have of this language dates to around 200 BC, written on a rock in the Brahmi script. Since then, however, Sinhala has gone on to form its own unique script, called the Sinhala script, which is used exclusively in the written form of this language, unlike say the Latin script, which is used in languages varying from French to English to Mari. Sinhala is an Indo-Aryan language, which is a branch of the much larger Indo-European language family tree. Other Indo-Aryan languages include, but are not limited to, Hindi, Bengali, Punjabi, Gujarati, and even Romani. These are of course all languages originating within South Asia / the Indian subcontinent. In today's modern Sri Lanka, Sinhala is spoken primarily in the south of the island, as well as the centre and west. This area as a whole also includes the two capital cities of Sri Lanka of Colombo and Shajarapurukote, so it's easy to understand why it's such a popular language within the nation. Sinhala is so popular across the island nation of Sri Lanka that even a couple of dialects / variations of the language have appeared, with one of those being Rodia. This is a dialectal form of Sinhala spoken by the Rodia people, who are thought to live primarily in the hill country, a term used for the mountainous parts of the island in the centre. The Rodia people have not historically had the best fortunes in Sri Lanka. They were once considered the nation's untouchables. Those familiar with India's caste system will know that the term of untouchables refers to those who were lowest in the system and in turn Indian society. This is unfortunately the case in Sri Lanka too. The Rodia for so long were seen as the lowest of society in Sri Lanka and in turn treated in a harsh way. Stories go that they were once descendants of Sri Lankan royalty who fell from grace. It seems that they became so isolated that their variation of Sinhala changed too. Though how many Rodia people there are now and how many speakers of the dialect there are too remains unknown. Another Sinhala dialect is called Veda, once again spoken by an ethnic group with the same name, the Veda. These people are seen as the last truly indigenous people in Sri Lanka, living in the nation's forests, foraging and hunting for their food. What's interesting about the Veda language is despite the fact that I'm saying it's a dialect of Sinhala, we aren't entirely sure that's the case. For some time, people thought that Veda was a completely different language altogether, but in more recent years, after the language has been studied more, it seems to just be a variation of Sinhala. Whatever the case, Veda is becoming rarer. Some Veda people don't speak it at all. There's around 2,500 Veda, with only 300 or so speaking the dialect natively. That's one of the 2 official languages and its variants covered. So what's the other official language of Sri Lanka? Well, it's a language by the name of Tamil. While Sinhala is very linked with Sri Lanka, the language of Tamil is spoken outside of the island nation. It is one of the 4 official languages of Singapore, as well as an official language of the Indian state of Tamil Nadu in southeast India. This is where the Tamil language is seen to originate from. This is of course the state of India which is closest to the nation of Sri Lanka, and within Sri Lanka, Tamil is most popularly spoken in the north and east of the island. From a geographic perspective, this makes sense. Southern India and northern Sri Lanka are very close to one another. People who speak Tamil are more often than not part of the Tamil ethnic group too, who originate from Tamil Nadu in southeast India. Tamils are believed to have started immigrating to Sri Lanka as far back as the 5th century BC. As to where the word Tamil itself came from, we don't seem to be too sure. Tamil, unlike Sinhala, is not part of the Indo-Aryan language family, but instead part of the Dravidian language family, which isn't a part of the Proto-Indo-European family at all, and is thought to be older than it. Other Dravidian languages are spoken across India too, like Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam. Due to the advanced age of many Dravidian languages, and especially Tamil, it is often seen as the oldest language still in use widely on our planet today. There's even a belief that Tamil is the language all other languages originated from. But that's simply not true, as we know that's not how languages work. Though Tamil is undeniably old, Tamil, like Sinhala, has its own unique script too, only used with that language. What's really interesting, however, is that while they now both have their own scripts and both come from different language families, both Sinhala and Tamil scripts originated with the aforementioned Brahmi script. It was this single writing system that formed the 2 systems used today in Sri Lanka. And speaking of today, despite how many Tamil speakers there are in India, in Sri Lanka that number sits at somewhere between 4 to 5 million. As mentioned, this language is primarily spoken in just the north and northeast of the island. While there aren't as many variations of Tamil in Sri Lanka as there are variations of Sinhala, there is something of note, that being something called Awi. Awi is used in Sri Lanka by the Sri Lankan Moors. The Moors are another one of Sri Lanka's ethnic minorities who on the whole are followers of Islam, as opposed to the Sinhalese who are primarily Buddhists and the Tamil who are primarily Hindus. These Sri Lankan Moors on a whole speak Tamil, however they use a specific variation of it, that being the aforementioned Awi. Awi is basically just the Tamil language but written with an extended form of the Arabic alphabet as opposed to the standard Tamil script, which is more often than not used. Awi is not exclusive to Sri Lanka, however. Muslims in the Indian state of Tamil Nadu also use Awi too. This is interesting as we don't all that often get a variation of a language whose key variation is the fact it is written in a completely different script. Though there are of course other languages spoken across Sri Lanka, minus Sinhala, Tamil and their variants. Remember I mentioned that one language that is recognised as a link language. That link language is of course the language you are hearing right now. English. It shouldn't come as a surprise to hear that English has a presence in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka for a huge amount of time was even under British rule, from 1796 to 1948. When I was over there myself, I remember pretty much everyone I interacted with speaking very good English. Over 20% of the population speaks English, and it is used in business and of course with tourists. Sri Lankan English, like many forms of English around the globe, is its own thing, however, with there being terms you will hear in Sri Lankan English you wouldn't hear in, say, British English or American English. My favourite example of a Sri Lankan English word is short eats, which is basically the Sri Lankan word for snack. This makes sense as snacks are something you eat in a short amount of time. English isn't the only European language that has been an influence in Sri Lanka, however. There are a small amount of people on the island who speak a Portuguese Creole language. The Portuguese visited Sri Lanka in the 16th century and many stayed on the island. Their descendants today are known as the Portuguese Burgher people, and some of them still speak this Creole. There are other kinds of Burgher people in Sri Lanka too, including Burghers of English and Dutch descent, but the only European Creole spoken in the land seems to be Portuguese. The Sri Lankan Portuguese Creole, however, seems to be very small these days. Wikipedia cites there just being 30 speakers in 1992. Whether that is higher or lower now doesn't seem to be clear. Sri Lanka is home to one other Creole too, that being a Malay Creole. The Malay language found itself in Sri Lanka when people from the Dutch East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, who spoke the language were brought to the island nation as labour. This language has actually flourished somewhat, with there being over 40,000 speakers in Sri Lanka today. I'm sure that beyond these languages there are even more being spoken there, by small communities and even expats. But what this goes to show you is that if you were ever fortunate enough to travel to this country, like I was able to do, you will find a whole plethora of languages awaiting you, from those official tongues of Sinhala and Tamil and their variants, to tongues from other parts of the world like English, Portuguese, and even Malay. Not too bad for a relatively small island, which many people probably presume is just part of India. Name Explained depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, and the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explained videos. $2 a month gets you all that, plus your name here with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/nameexplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT, and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thank you all so much.